54 minutes from right now.
There's a few stories that we've covered just about every day, and we could cover every hour and every segment.
Recession, inflation, the border.
The border, and what this administration has done in their negligence and their quest to be the exact opposite of President Trump's administration. They've let almost everybody in, and word came out in Central South America, in the Caribbean, in Africa, through the Ukraine. If you come to the border, you're going to get in. If you go through our immigration system, it's going to be lengthy, and they're going to have to take tests and pay fees. So they have stormed into through our system. Mm-hmm. They have blown up the Border Patrol. They have forced them off the border. Only 30% are there. And if you look at how many people have come across illegally, it's to the tune of 800,000 gotaways and over 4 million. Right. And then you wonder, when not only are they actually overrunning the border towns, they are also overrunning small and big cities across the country, some of which the Texas governor and the Arizona governors are so angry about what's happening at the border, they've actually sponsored and paid for, with state dollars, buses to load with immigrants who want to go to Washington, D.C., so the administration can see front and center how bad the illegal immigrant system is. And finally, these mayors in New York City and D.C. are speaking out.
They are, and we were just looking at a couple of the buses that it looked like offloaded some of the migrants from our southern border in Washington, D.C. on Friday. Now, we're going to tell you about, it's been a problem for Texas and Arizona and New Mexico, people along the border, but now apparently it's a national emergency in Washington, D.C., because 10 days ago, according to WRC, the NBC affiliate down in Washington that I used to work at, Mayor Bowser, 10 days ago, sent a note to the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin requesting the National Guard show up in Washington, D.C. She asked for 150 guardsmen to handle the arrival of what she described, and here you can see some who were arriving last Friday, 4,000 migrants who arrived on 200 buses. Now, according to the New York Post, Arizona has sent on 33 buses 1,263 migrants. Texas did not respond. Nonetheless, it's an emergency, and she's calling out the Guard. Here's the mayor.
We need space, and we need the federal government to be involved. So I've asked for the deployment of the Guard, as long as we need the Guard to deal with the humanitarian crisis that we expect to escalate. The number of people crossing the border seeking asylum, we expect to only go up. And we need to make sure that there is a national response, not an ad hoc, city by city, state by state response. We know that the federal government does this.
So what has changed? We used to hear from only the Arizona governor, only the Texas governor, people who lived in that area. And now we're hearing it from leaders around the country, like Mayor Bowser, because it's a problem in her city now. She's feeling what some of these other governors, just a small little smidgen of what they're feeling down in Texas and Arizona. Originally, she championed accepting these migrants entering illegal. She said it was a human rights issue. They should be able to come over. But then over, a weekend ago, 2 weekends ago, she was complaining on one of the Sunday shows about the surge in her city, the homeless shelters. She said that some of these migrants she's fearing are being tricked into coming to D.C. Yeah. But now she realizes we need help. This is a problem. They're packing our homeless shelters, so now we need National Guard, and she's asking the D.C. Armory to be the processing center.
Ainsley, this is a live picture from Capitol Hill right now. That is one of the migrant buses. We assume it was sent by Texas because the number of Texas buses far outweighs Arizona. And let's see if these people, when they come off, they are so relieved because they've been tricked. Once again, we see this looks like a family unit, a man and a child, a couple of children right there.
You said, don't worry about it. America's open to everybody. No paperwork. No idea if they're positive for COVID. No idea what the deal is. It's okay.
But does this look like something you need to call the National Guard out for? Because had the federal government taken care of things at our southern border and closed the southern border, they wouldn't be in Texas and Arizona, and they wouldn't be then bused to our nation's capital. There would not be a problem.
federal funding. She was saying the federal government's going to cover this. FEMA was going to help with the homeless shelters. She's asking for the National Guard so that she doesn't have to use her officers. A volunteer at one of these organizations, one of these homeless or one of these facilities that houses them, Isaias Guerrero, says, we didn't see anyone from the mayor's office here helping us with these illegals. No one from the Office of Latino Affairs was here to welcome them. They just want to wash their hands because it is seen as a hot potato. Instead, the mayor's tweeting out, I'm going to be cutting ribbons at the new affordable housing district in our area.
Unbelievable. So Governor Greg Abbott says this in response. D.C. has experienced a fraction of the disastrous impact the border crisis has caused Texas. Mayor Bowser should stop attacking Texas for securing the border and demand Joe Biden do his job. That's how desperate this governor is to get the attention of the country. And this is how bad things are getting. Democratic mayors are now speaking up because they're so overrun, and the negligence at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is beyond description. Peter asked the press secretary yesterday about this request for the National Guard. Where does this come from? And by the way, on a side note, the way she treated the National Guard when she had them, making them sleep in the streets, and also, and you remember when they kicked them out of hotels they were supposed to stay in? Now you want them because of your Democratic president who refuses to enforce our border, allowing security to run rampant? Here's the exchange we probably want you to understand.
Is the president going to approve that request for the National Guard?
I said this last week about Republicans using migrants as a political tool, and that is shameful, and that is just wrong.
So the White House's preference would be for small towns in Texas and Arizona to have to take care of these migrants rather than a large metropolitan city like Washington, D.C.
That is not what I said.
That is what you said. You said you think that
I
people
said
are
that
using
there is.
migrants.
Yeah, they are. They're sending migrants to big cities on purpose, using them as a political ploy. What Republicans are doing is wrong, and there is a process in place, and we should follow the process. There's a legal process in place, and they should follow it.
But all of these leaders said, bring them over. We should open our borders, let them come in. But now they're coming in, and now they're coming to some of their cities. They don't like it. And now she's saying it's the Republicans' fault?
Well, does this, okay, so the fact that the mayor of Washington, D.C. is begging for the National Guard to show up, and only one correspondent asked about that yesterday at the press briefing. It's crazy. If they need to understand what's going on, it's this simple. You were taught in like fourth grade. It's cause and effect. The cause is there is an open border down south. And the effect is these migrants are streaming into the United States. They need some place to go. Texas and Arizona said, you know what? Let's give these people a free ride to our nation's capital. And these people who you're looking at right like now live,
25, 30 people?
30, 40 people, they all got onto that bus voluntarily. Cause and effect. Because of what the administration is doing, those people are now wondering, where do we go? Chip Roy, the congressman from Texas, says, look, Mayor, you are finally catching up to the problem we have had for a long time. Watch.
It's interesting hearing the mayor of Washington, D.C., which is where I'm sitting right now, complaining about 4,000 people on 200 buses that Governor Abbott has sent to Washington, D.C. since April, running to the Pentagon saying, oh my gosh, we need the National Guard. Oh, well, you know what? Cry me a frickin' river, right? You know, welcome to the party, pal. Down in Texas, today in the border, we're going to have about 7,000 people crossing the border across the entire southwest border, and about half of that in Texas. Cry me a river about the, 50 bodies in a mobile morgue in Brooks County, Texas, where Sheriff Benny Martinez is having to deal with dead migrants all over the ranches. Talk to the families that are, concerned about the people packing pistols. Like this guy, this illegal immigrant on a ranch that I just got this picture about an hour ago from the county attorney in Kinney County, Texas. That's what we're dealing with every day.
Yeah, and that is indeed a crisis that is causing a crisis in major cities. So Mayor Adams about a week ago said, New York, hey, Governor of Texas and Arizona, stop sending people here. They said, we're not. So then he came out the next day and said, hey, President Biden, stop sending plane loads of illegal immigrants into our airports, Westchester County in particular, and possibly in MacArthur Airport on Long Island. So what they want to do is they are sending them to Pennsylvania. They are sending them to Jacksonville. They are sending them to Westchester, New York, in the middle of the night with no one's approval from mayors to governors. And now it's gotten so bad that the mayors are saying and governors are saying this is getting out of control. What is going to get their attention? And what is the press corps thinking? not asking. They must have a really hard job, waking up every day and not asking about recession, not asking about Hunter, and not asking about the Border Patrol. The Hunter Biden situation relates directly to the president compromising our foreign policy, perhaps certainly worthy of a question. A border broken like no other time in history. We better not send any reporters there. And a recession. By all definitions, that's what we're experiencing. They can't even probe that. Why go to work?
Well, when you think about what Chip Roy just said, he said 7,000 migrants will stream into Texas today. That is about...
Well, Texas and Arizona, the border.
Right.
Half of them, Texas.
Well, that is double the number of people who have been bussed into our nation's capital. So if they think it is worthy of calling out the National Guard in D.C. over 4,000, keep in mind, 7,000 coming in today.
Such a good point. 4,000 total gone to D.C.?
Total.
7,000 a day down on our border.
Scary.
Right. 8 million, we're looking at 4 million.
But this is their message. They're saying, y'all come in. Illegals, come in, but stay down there. Don't come to our city.
No other country allows this.
Stay down in Texas. Stay in Arizona. Don't come to our city.
We're running a $900 billion deficit. $900 billion, all social programs that were committed to by Americans. How many people are sitting there living paycheck to paycheck saying, I think I want to spend a few $1,000s on people I don't know who don't belong here from another country? No one would write that check. Once the money arrives, they pledge it to people that have no business being here.
I'm going to predict they do not send out the National Guard because then they would be admitting it's a problem. Stay tuned for that. In the meantime, straight ahead on this Friday, Flash Plus, more than 100 convicted felons caught in just one border section as thousands of illegal migrants surge into the country. The Yuma mayor is next with the staggering numbers. Actually, there are the numbers right there.
Sorry.
In just over a week, border agents in Yuma, Arizona, encountered more than 5,000 illegal immigrants from 46 separate countries. No joke. Among them, over 100 convicted felons. Here to react is Yuma, Arizona Mayor Douglas Nichols. Mr. Mayor, what is it going to take to get Washington's attention? How bad is this problem?
Well, this is bad. This is something we've been trying to address for about a year and a half now, and that is when our Border Patrol agents are not doing their mission, which is border protection, and doing things like immigration processing. These convicted felons get through the process or get around the process and make it harder for them to protect the country. And then people, as we know, end up moving through the whole country. So these felons were on their way to other parts of the United States.
Have they had convictions in America? How are you able to find out their background if some of their crimes are committed in other countries?
Well, that's a huge challenge because a lot of these countries do not share information or don't really have a centralized database. And so Border Patrol's really at a disadvantage when they're trying to determine those kind of elements. But these, I believe, are all either in country or in countries that do keep a database that we're connected with.
I want people to see these numbers. Year to date, in 2021, you had a ridiculous 60,000 come here illegally, encounters, we should say. Forget about the gotaways. And now in 2022, you already have 235,000. That is an increase of almost 300%. Now you have a mayor in D.C. upset that she's getting a few thousand extra people in her shelters. What's your message to her?
Well, I think it's great she's finally recognizing there's a problem. We've been having this conversation for a while, so it's great to have another mayor on board. But really, it has to be a whole country response. And if it's affecting D.C., imagine what it's doing to a community of 100,000 people along the border when there's 1,000 a day.
So you have people that might overwhelm a homeless shelter. Then you have other people here, like you say, convicted felons, and others just moving drugs through our country. In Arizona, CBP agents have seized heroin, meth, fentanyl, and stashed in a vehicle. I want people at home to see this. This is how innovative and how diabolical they are. This is some of the things stuck into dashboards in the interior of seats out there to kill Americans. A lot of the times, it's not to get them addicted, it's to kill them. From China to the cartels across the border. Mayor, what is your responsibility in this, in stopping this? What could you actually do?
Well, really, all we can do at this point is support our federal partners, CBP, like our customs agents at the ports and our Border Patrol agents along the the whole border. So we're really focused on supporting those efforts and sharing intel.
Hey, has Senator Mark Kelly been a big plus?
He has been down to the border here several times, have been in constant communication. And the announcement yesterday about closing 4 gaps, he was in the middle of that the whole time. So he has been engaged, which as our state senator, on a border state, I think that's an appropriate level of engagement.
Wouldn't it be great for him to go to Washington, D.C. and say that on the Senate floor? As a Democrat, he could actually make a huge difference instead of doing it quietly, if I'm doing it at all. Huge disappointment. Mr. Mayor, thank you so much. Mayor Douglas Nichols.
Thank you.
All right, straight ahead. Hey, the Biden White House is determined to spin our economic decline, but will Democrats' new spending plan just pile up even more inflation? Larry Kudlow on that.
Do you listen to the TV on?
Josh Shapiro and Joe Biden, 2 career politicians and 2 terrible records. Josh Shapiro supported the largest gas tax in the country. No wonder we're seeing historically high gas prices. As Attorney General, Josh Shapiro refuses to prosecute gun crimes, even as homicides hit record levels. Talk about out of touch. Pennsylvanians have had enough of painful prices and out of control inflation under Joe Biden. Pennsylvania can't afford career politician Josh Shapiro.
This into the news, since this is a news channel, denials across the board from the White House as economic data from yesterday reveals the United States is in a recession after the classic case of 2 straight quarters of negative GDP growth.
Meanwhile, President Biden touts an almost $370 billion spending plan toward the climate crisis.
Yeah, can you imagine redefining something else we all know to be true? Jackie Heinrich is live at the White House with more. Hey, Jackie.
Hey, good morning to you guys. Yeah, the White House has been trying to get out ahead of these numbers for at least a week now. And as far as they are concerned, this is no recession at all. They reject the technical definition of a recession under the commonly understood way to look at the word, which is 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP. That is what we had, and yet the Biden administration rejects it. They instead see this as a transition to a period of stable growth.
I want to say 2 things about the GDP report. Our job market remains historically strong. Our economy created more than 9 million jobs since I came to office. The Fed Chairman Powell made it clear that he doesn't think the U.S. economy is currently in a recession.
So while the White House is not saying the word recession, they are willing to say inflation, now making a case for even more spending after Senator Joe Manchin unveiled a reconciliation bill he secretly crafted with Chuck Schumer. They've dubbed it the Inflation Reduction Act. It dedicates billions to climate, healthcare, prescription drug spending, and also includes a new corporate tax. And it has the promise for this president of some new life to his summer, maybe even to his presidency. So a lot of pressure behind the scenes to get this done. Democrat Senator Joe Manchin, once maligned by his party for sidelining the president's agenda, says now he never gave up on it.
People thinking I walked away and done this and that, or I reversed my position. I've never been in reverse in my lifetime, and I never walked away.
Now, critics say the negative economic growth from those GDP numbers amid rising consumer costs, inflation hit 9.1% last month, and of course wages have not been keeping up, makes all of this a bad time potentially to impose a minimum tax on corporations because it could be passed on to the consumer.
This investment in environmental justice is real. It also provides tax credits that will create thousands of good-paying jobs. This bill would be the most significant legislation in history to tackle the climate crisis.
So we have no plans to see the president today. However, he's got a big week ahead of him, 1 week left before he starts his summer vacation, and he's got to close this deal, which includes getting Senator Kyrsten Sinema on board, and the White House is keeping very hush-hush about whether or not they've been able to convince her.
Jackie, was there much pushback yesterday in the press room about the president's effort to not bring up the word recession?
I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. Their impression in the press room.
Was there any press outside Fox pushing on the press secretary
there was.
about using the word recession?
You know, I think since the White House has tried to get out ahead of this and they changed their definition of recession under the blog post from the Council of Economic Advisors, they rolled out people like Yellen and Brian Deese to say this. There has been some pushback, but it's noticeable how many people covered these numbers when they came out yesterday as an indication of a potential recession, rather than just, this is the technical definition of the word, as people in this administration have even referred to it as recently as last May. The RNC had, videos and some statements out from Biden's own economic advisors using the common definition of a recession as recently as a few months ago. So clearly they are framing this in a way that is positive for them. No one wants agenda on their record, but not probably as much pushback as we should be giving them overall.
It's unbelievable. Thanks, Jackie. So what you're talking about is the New York Times.
To your question, Kristen Welker and others yesterday asked about, why are they moving the goalposts? Why aren't they calling it a recession?
So what Jackie said, the New York Times wrote, U.S. economy shows another decline, fanning recession fears. CNN, U.S. economy contracts again, fueling recession fears.
Recession fears.
We're in a recession. Just say how confident you are to come out of it, some things that are positive. But when you tell people what their experience is not real, they don't believe what you say next. That's the issue, and that is the cover of the New York Post today.
It is the literal definition of recession.
That's right. Recession, pronounced, it's a noun. Plural noun is recessions. And it says a period of temporary economic decline during which trade and industrial activity are reduced. Sounds about right. Generally defined by a fall in GDP in two successive quarters. Sounds about right. The country is in the depths of a recession, is how you would use it.
Did that happen? Quarter one, we dropped 1.6%. Quarter two, 0.9%, almost 1%. The literal definition of recession is that if you have two back-to-backs with a dropping GOP, you're in a recession, which literally we are in a recession if you go by the definition, but they're trying to change that.
Right, and Joe Biden said a couple of times yesterday, he said this is a different time because you look at, two GDP numbers down, but we've got such good employment numbers. He said the unemployment rate was 3.5%. But what he does,
we came out of COVID, people are hiring again.
Well, but here's what he does not count: the labor participation rate. Millions of Americans stopped looking, and they don't count in that number. And
Charles Payne said that's the number to look at.
Exactly, and that is why it is so hard for people to find people to work, because people have dropped out of the labor market for whatever reason. They're not there. That's why the number is low, and that is the hook that the president is hanging his hat on. It's not a recession because of the low unemployment. I just explained why we have low unemployment. People have stopped looking.
And how do you feel? Do you feel like you're in a recession? I mean, I guarantee the majority of Americans, if they've gotten a pay raise this year, it's not above the amount of inflation. Inflation's 9.1%. So you're actually losing money. You're paying an extra tax on everything that you buy because we are in an inflation.
And we can't gloss over what happened yesterday. Over the last 48 hours, we passed $800 billion in spending with this CHIPS bill and with the Joe Manchin, Chuck Schumer sneak attack, which is basically focused on climate change. Let me ask you, if you're dealing with inflation, if you're having trouble making ends meet, if you're one of the 60 to 70% living paycheck to paycheck that suddenly find yourself in deficit, do you care about the solar panels? Are now going to be tax incentives on solar panels? Are there going to be turbines for windmills? China is laughing at us. This is somebody saying your house may be on fire, but your hair looks good. Don't emphasize that. We have a huge problem, and I'm pretty sure in every poll I see, the most I see in terms of priorities for the average American, climate change is around 2%. Everybody's talking about inflation. And according to the New York Times and most economists, the Treasury Department hasn't even looked at all this spending and see how it affects inflation. The number one concern of yours. And they say that it'll have little, and then we had Jason Furman say it'll have little effect, maybe get inflation down a little. How could you, as President of the United States, not acknowledge recession and not go after inflation and sit there with a straight face and say, I'm addressing climate change, and then storm out there with your senior shuffle?
Think about the people that this affects the most, people on a fixed income, the older people. And they're in the second half of their life, if not later than that. they're not so worried about what's going to happen to our world in, 20, 40, 50, 60 years or 100 years. They're more worried about retirement. They're fixed income. They can't afford to put gas in their car or buy that extra meat at the grocery store. They have to go do all their groceries one day per week. We've heard that time and time again from people at the diners because they can't afford the gas to keep going back out every single day.
Well, the Democrats call it the Inflation Reduction Act.
That's a joke. They're spending
P.T.
money.
Barnum named
It's
that.
an extra tax on everything.
Well, here's the thing. Joe Biden said it's going to reduce inflation because my advisors told me that. Of course, these are the same advisors that got us to the point we're at. It really should be called not the Inflation Reduction Act, but the Midterm Loss Reduction Act, because clearly the Democrats are loving this. Because, Ainsley, to your point about older Americans, they like the idea of lower prices on prescription drugs.
Correct, yeah.
A lot of people like the idea
We all
of
like
deficit
that.
reduction.
If it turns out that.
We all like that,
So
right.
So the Democrats look at this as a win before the November elections, and for them, this is a good thing. We're now talking about that rather than inflation. We're talking about, oh, look, what Joe Biden and those Democrats did. My insulin costs less.
Right.
So let's see. But a big win in Washington. Joe Biden suddenly, after a bad 6 months, is having a really good end of the week.
Yeah. Well, the